This video, you will review section 5.2 on percent problems. So for these problems, you want to draw a bar model to find the missing value. Make sure to show all your work. So for number 1, it says to find 25% of 240. So what you want to do is, first step is to take the percent and write it as a fraction. So if you have 25%, remember percent means out of 100, so 25% means 25 out of 100. And then you want to reduce that. Divide the numerator and denominator by 25, and you get 1/4. So the denominator tells you how many parts to break your bar model into. So you're going to break bar model into 4 parts. So take your bar model, break it into 4 equal parts. Okay, then of 240, 240 is the total. So the total value of your bar model. So I'm going to label the total value of my bar model is 240. Okay. Then now we need to figure out what's the value of each of these parts. So to figure out the value of each part, you take 240 and divide it by 4. And that value would be 60. So that means that the value of each of these parts is 60. Okay, and then we want to look at what's the value of 1/4 of our bar model. So 1 out of those 4 pieces. Here's 1 out of the 4 pieces. That represents the 25%, because that's 1/4. So that means that 1/4 of 240 would be just 60. Okay, so we would answer that 25% of 240 is 60. So basically 60 is our answer. Okay, number 2 says to find 80% of 160. So take 80% and write it as a fraction. So that would be 80 out of 100. And then you want to reduce that. So you can divide by 20. And you get 4/5. So the denominator tells you how many parts to break your bar model. So you're going to break bar model into 5 parts. Okay, so sketch your bar model. And break it into 5 equal parts as best you can. So there's 5 equal parts. And then the total value of your bar model would be 160. So that's the overall value. And now we need to figure out what's the value of each of these parts. So I have question marks there. So we want to divide 160 by 5 to get the value of each part. So the value of each part is 32. So now I'm going to label each part in my bar model as 32. And And then we're looking at 4/5 because that's what it says to figure out what 4 out of the 5 parts would be. So 4 out of the 5 parts, that would be 1, 2, 3, 4. So you want to know the value of those 4 parts. And the percentage value, that's 80%. But we want to know the numerical value. So you take 32 and you can add 32 plus 32 plus 32 plus 32. Or you can take 4 times 32 to get the answer. And you get 128. So that means that 80% of 160 is 128. So the answer we're looking for is 128. Okay, number 3. 15 is 20% of what number? So again, 20%. Okay, so that means you take 20% and write it out of 100. That would be 20 out of 100, which if you divide the numerator and denominator by 20, that equals 1/5. So what you want to do is take your bar model and break it into 5 parts. So once you have your bar model broken down into 5 parts, you want to label. So the total value of our bar model, it says of what, so we don't know what that is. Okay, we're only told that 15 is 20% of the whole thing. So 15 is 1/5 of the bar model. That's what this phrase is saying. So 15 is 20%. That means that 15 is 1/5 of your bar model. So 15 is one of these fifths. Okay, so if we know that each of these parts are the same, so that 1/5 would be 20%. If we know these parts are all the same, that means if one part is 15, that means each of the remaining portions are also 15. Okay, now you want to figure out the value, the total value of the entire bar model. So you could take 15 plus 15 plus 15 plus 15 plus 15. Or you can take 5 times 15 to get the total value of your bar model. And you end up getting 75. So that means that 15 is 20% of 75. So 75 is our answer. Okay, number 4 is very similar. So it says 30 is 25% of what number? So let's take 25% and write it as a fraction. So that 25 would be 25 over 100, which reduces to 1/4. So you're going to break your bar model into fourths. Okay, so let's label our 1/4 would be 25%. So 25% is one of these fourths. And then we're trying to figure out what's the total value of our bar model. Because that's what it said, of what total. So we're told that 30 is 25% of your bar model. So you know 30 is 25% of the total. So we're going to label this 1/4 as 30. So if that part is 30 and we know that each of these parts are all equal, that means that the value of each part would also be 30. So to get the total, which is what we're being asked to find, we can take 30 plus 30 plus 30 plus 30, or you can take 4 times 30, which is 120. So that means that our answer would be that 30 is 25% of 120. And 120 would be our answer. Okay, so now what you need to do is, now that you've reviewed, you want to try the practice knowledge check on your own, which is on a separate link. So try that on your own and then check your answers using the key that's posted.